CPS students return to class, but the bad blood between Mayor Lightfoot and the teachers union seems likely to persist. The fight to redraw Chicago's ward map drags on, and more candidates emerge for hotly contested statewide seats. Here with all that and more are Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz for Spotlight Politics. So, Amanda, CPS students return to school under the deal approved earlier this week by the union's House of Delegates. Rank and file members just tonight narrowly okayed that plan as well, 55.5% voting in favor of it. Only a little over 18,000 members of their 25,000 members voting. What does this tell us? Anything about whether members, support union leaders or about the kind of leverage that the CTU has over the city?
I think that there is a whole lot that we can discuss here. There's a lot of consternation about returning to school. Some teachers saying, what did we fight for? This was really just a super expensive way because, of course, teachers weren't paid for the days that they weren't teaching, of getting KN95 masks that the district said were already on the way. Some feeling really unsafe about this. Others weren't too thrilled that the union had taken this action in the first place. So I'm not quite sure that Stacey Davis Gates or Jesse Sharkey need to worry about their tenure. Something, by the way, I always like to point out to remember, we think of these actions from a public point of view, but union leaders, all unions across the board, run for election themselves. Not saying that they need to worry about their own future, but certainly I think that that close vote shows that this is something where COVID means a lot. It is scary for folks, but it's also their own children. Many CPS members are CPS parents themselves. So this isn't the normal sort of union action where you see a more unified front.
So despite union leadership making a deal with the city, CTU Vice President Stacey Davis Gates on Monday called Mayor Lightfoot, quote, unfit to lead the city. Let's take a listen.
She is on a one-woman kamikaze mission to destroy our public schools. She has not taken good care over the safety of the workers and the students that attended. She leverages Black and brown students when she is fighting, but she ain't implementing anything in that building that looks like a plan of safety.
All right, Heather, do you expect the CTU will back a challenger to the mayor or, whether it is a candidate that they support or someone from within, as many have suspected it could be Stacey Davis Gates?
There is no doubt that the Chicago Teachers Union will endorse a candidate in the 2023 election. I do not often make predictions, but I feel very confident about that one. As to whether Stacey Davis Gates herself is going to run, time is going to have to tell. But you heard her just then. She minced no words. She made no bones about it, that she blames Mayor Lightfoot not only for the work stoppage, however you call it, but also the fact that many of her members, many teachers in Chicago, feel very unsafe. And there are a number of parents who are also worried. There was no kumbaya moment at the end of this dispute. And if anything, people are angry because a lot of teachers don't think they got what they wanted out of this. And there were people who were angry that it happened in the first place. So nobody's happy.
Yeah, and just last night here on this program, Stacey Davis Gates was asked that question and about whether or not she planned to run. And like many politicians have said, she is focused right now on the job that she currently has, both as vice president of CTU and as a mother of students in Chicago public schools. A group of CPS students organizing on social media say that they're planning a walkout on Friday. Some CPS parents say they're coordinating to keep students home through the end of the week. Paris, it seems like, the COVID safety plan that the district and the union have agreed to hasn't necessarily done much to quell the fears around the virus.
Perhaps not, and as both Amanda and Heather mentioned, the union did not get a whole lot of what they were asking for in terms of testing and some of the metrics to shut down schools. They got a little bit, there was some compromise there, but you're seeing students do this across the country as the Omicron surge is here. But I want to go back to that 55 to 44 vote for a second. There's a pattern here that we see in these labor stoppages over the last few years. First, with the strike of 2019, where the union leadership gets its members all kind of riled up and they vote overwhelmingly to either go on strike or to institute some kind of labor movement. And then they're out, and then they kind of come back and agree to something that wasn't everything that they asked for, and that's what's happened here. And it leads me to believe, so much of CTU doing this is about controlling the narrative. They want to control the perception, and I don't know that they did that. I think there were a lot of parents now, after all these labor stoppages over many years, that perhaps were not in the corner of CTU. They probably had a lot of anger for CPS and the mayor as well, but not 100% siding with CTU here because of the effects of at-home remote learning. They know how devastating it's been. They know how difficult it's been. The fact that this came at the 11th hour, so perhaps CTU did not have any leverage the longer that it stayed out. And that might explain why they agreed to this deal that a lot of their members don't like.
I also wonder, Paris, the fact that you have literally the White House, you have President Joe Biden constantly weighing in on Chicago, and the potential trouble that could cause is, of course, Democrats are eyeing midterm elections, whether, I don't know, there was any sort of interference from Washington that might have played a role in getting things tied up pretty quick.
With the midterms coming, Amanda, Democrats definitely don't want this inter-party fight, but Governor Jb Pritzker, and maybe you know this better, Amanda, I don't think we heard from him really until today. I mean, there was the announcement of the tests, but he didn't really put his thumb on the scales very much, did he?
No, he didn't, and you had some calling for that. House Republican leader Jim Durkin had asked for him to weigh in. That said, unclear what necessarily the governor could do, but we did hear him today saying, yes, the place for children is to be in schools, and that is the decision that the Illinois State Board of Education had made decisively at the beginning of the year, limiting somewhat the capacity for districts to be able to go remote. That really is sort of, there's a lot of technicalities there in terms of what options districts have in times such as COVID, but that's what you heard the CPS leaders reference.
Yeah, and of course, that's something that we'll be looking into more as the week and next week goes on. Before we move on to some city council news, though, sad loss this week that we wanted to acknowledge. Heather, tell us about Dick Stone.
Well, he covered City Hall for WIND, and it is not an exaggeration to say that he really set the standard that we all strive to live up to. He is probably best known for peppering Mayor Richard J. Daley with questions, but he also served as a foreign correspondent for UPI and then later worked as a political consultant. And I know I'm not the only one at WTTW this week has been thinking of Fran Spielman, the Chicago Sun-Times City Hall reporter, his wife, and their son, Jason. And we will really strive to live up to the example that Dick set for all of us covering the wild and woolly City Hall in Chicago.
And if I could just jump in, Dick Stone also later in life became a political consultant. I talked with him a few times on stories. Very nice man, very clearly had so much love for his family and especially his wife, Fran Spielman, who took his mantle and became the dean of the City Hall Press Corps. And of course, our thoughts are with her and her family.
And may he rest in peace. And then to City Council, Paris. City Council held another, long series of hearings yesterday over the. Oh, sorry, this question is actually going to go to Heather. But over this contentious ward remap, how likely does it look that the remap is headed for a referendum, Heather?
Well, it is certainly more likely now than it was before the end of the year. There was some hope that this sort of a holiday break was going to reset everything and people would be able to come to a compromise. But if anything, the acrimony has dialed it up several notches. And, the latest debate is over if they do go to referendum, how much it would cost. Alderman Michelle Harris of the Rules Committee says it could cost taxpayers $40 million, but I have not been able to find any documentation of those costs. And in fact, the referendum is already budgeted for by the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. So I will be asking a lot more questions about that.
As always. So this afternoon, Governor Jb Pritzker, who had been isolating after being exposed to COVID, gave a press conference about the current rise in cases.
This current wave of COVID is causing more people to get sick than ever before in the pandemic. And the vast majority of the serious illnesses and deaths are among the unvaccinated. But as difficult as this moment is, there will be an end to it.
And to that end, the governor's office announced a new campaign this week to persuade the unvaccinated to get a shot. So Amanda, so many people, who just haven't dug in on this, how much of a dent do you think this campaign is going to make?
I mean, Brandis, I like to believe in the power of television and radio and media, and yet I cannot imagine that any commercials are going to change folks' minds at this point in time in the pandemic. If anything, you would think that the mandates that have been imposed within Chicago and Cook County to require proof of vaccination to do a lot of entertainment sort of activities would change minds, or the rise of Omicron, looking at hospitalization stats, that would lead people who don't want to be vaccinated or have been frightened to do so. And also, by the way, it's been now some time since the initial dose of vaccine, so people that were worried about any sort of impact and from that have seen that that is not happening. But I don't imagine the ads are going to do it.
Okay, so candidates for governor can start gathering signatures, because guess what? That's coming up again. They can start gathering those signatures tomorrow. Paris, a lot of rumblings that we're seeing a new Republican potentially jump in the race.
Yeah. I mean, we're already in an election cycle. Again, those petitions circulating starting tomorrow. And if you talk to sources in the Republican Party and reports that have been out there, there will be a new candidate announced perhaps as early next week, likely to be the mayor of Aurora, Richard Irvin, with lieutenant governor candidate on this slate, Avery Bourne, a state representative from Springfield. This would purport to be the slate that would get the significant money of the state's richest person, Ken Griffin. And there are a lot of folks associated with the former Governor Rauner administration that are reportedly and allegedly involved with this campaign. Irvin is an odd choice because he has voted Democrat in recent elections. He has taken positions, especially on COVID mitigations, that perhaps aren't as popular with the Republican base. So there's question in the Republican Party whether he could get through a primary. But again, if he is the Griffin candidate, he would have a lot of money. It would seem to be the tack that he would take would be to talk about crime and to focus on keeping Illinois safe and Chicago safe, because, of course, this has been Ken Griffin's cause célèbre, and he lays so much of the blame at Governor Pritzker's feet.
Okay, so real quick on the General Assembly before we go. Amanda, another issue Republicans there have been highlighting is the fact that the General Assembly still does not have an inspector general.
Yeah, this is the watchdog that is supposed to see any sort of potential or accusations of ethical wrongdoing by state legislators. And sometime that office had been vacant for a total of 4 years, and then you had a huge backlog of cases built up for an inspector general to investigate. You have the former inspector general saying that this is an office that is really a paper tiger, despite some ethical changes. That's why she's leaving. She made that known in July, and yet again, Democrats, Republicans cannot agree on a replacement. So right now, there's nobody safeguarding other than, well, us journalists trying to do our best, but we don't have that same subpoena power.
Heather, same case in City Council. No inspector general there either. What's up?
That's right. Inspector General Joe Ferguson left office 3 months ago this week. We have no sense of when a recommendation will be made to the City Council's Ethics Committee for a replacement. We have no idea whether Mayor Lightfoot will accept that recommendation, because she was very critical of Joe Ferguson. And we are still waiting for a number of important investigations that is now being conducted by the interim Inspector General. So I guess send us your complaints and allegations. We'll do our best.
Can I just chime in? It took so many years for the city IG to have the kind of oversight power and teeth that it ended up having, and independence. And if the city goes back on that independence and that power, that's a loss for the city. I mean, the city council needs to really focus on this.
Absolutely. That's Spotlight. Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharoon, and Paris Schutz. Thanks, guys.